The local stories you care about.
WLBB, Carrollton, News Talk, 1330, FM 106.3.
FM 106.3. I'm your host, Sara Claudia Tillman. Community Voice is brought to you by Tanner Health Systems and Oak Mountain Academy. And if you missed our introduction to the show last month, I'll give you a little recap. I'm going to be hosting the show once a month, and I'll be joined by a different guest from the community who, like myself, has faced a different challenge or change and has found the strength to persevere through the hard times that they have faced. So I lost my sight 5 years ago, and on my journey, I've met so many people who have these stories. And today, our first guest is Mr. Joe Garrett. And Joe is a longtime Carrollton resident. He is a financial advisor and owner at Garrett and Robinson Investment Management and Wealth Planning. And he also writes a weekly column for the Times-Georgian in the Southern Spice section. He's also a family man. His wife, Allie, and him have 4 sons, and they are very active in the community. So welcome, Joe.
Thank you. It's good to be here. And thank you for inviting me to be on your very first show as host.
Yes, you should feel honored.
I do feel honored. We had a conversation just a minute ago outside before we went on the air, and I actually worked in radio when I was in college in Athens, and I was a sportscaster for WRFC. And I'll never forget my very first day on the air. I kept saying the word WRFC, and I remember walking out, and the station manager said, "It's W." So that's the Carrollton accent that came out in me, and that was the first. That's the only advice I can give you in radio, because I haven't been in radio since 1991, so it's been a long time. Well, but it's good to be back.
I'll try to keep that in mind, but I want to start out asking you how you got involved with your weekly column in Times-Georgian, because I'm very curious about that. How did that start up, and how did it sort of evolve?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. Let me kind of give you a backstory. Carol Martin was she was a columnist for the Times-Georgian, I don't know, probably 25 years. She occupied the front page of the Times-Georgian's Southern Spice section, where she wrote a weekly column, and basically it had just about all things going on in the community and whatever was going on in her life. And just a little backstory there about Carol. She was a neighbor when I was growing up in the Chapel Heights subdivision. And the Martin, Carol and her husband, Dr. Mac Martin, had the absolute best yard in the neighborhood. They had a front yard that was so big that they just basically turned it into a ball field. For we had a neighborhood just full of kids. It was really like one of those Norman Rockwell type neighborhoods where kids were outside all the time, playing outside all the time. This was long before video games and cable television came along, and so one of the things what was really so neat about the Martins is they let us dig up their yard. I mean, we built we had a pitcher's mound, a home plate, all of that. They just let us do it. And how many people would let you today go in and let you just tear up their yard so you could turn it into a ball field? No. So Carol died suddenly of a heart attack, and that was a surprise to everyone. And I'm sitting in the back row of the First United Methodist Church in Carrollton during her funeral, and it just kept going through my head the whole time during the funeral about how she let us dig up her yard. How many people do that today? So after the funeral, I decided I just wanted to somehow pay tribute to her for all of her years of writing, and also just for kind of a giant thank you note for all those years she let us play in her yard. So I write the column, and I didn't. I remember having a conversation when I finished it, and a coworker of mine, Tyler Sabo, was helped me edit that first piece, and he told me, he said, "Why don't you, he encouraged me, why don't you run right now, see what they're going to do?" And I'm like, I'm not sure if I want to do this whole columnist thing or not, or even ask to see if they would even think about it again. But I go to the Times-Georgian and meet with Leonard Woolsey. And Leonard, he read half of it, and he put it down, and he looked at me, and he said, why don't you send me some more? And he could have easily have said, no, I'm not interested, or thank you, that was nice, but we're not going to print this. But instead, he not only printed it, but he asked me to turn in some more columns. And so that was at the beginning of 2012, and here we are in 2020, and I'm still doing it every week. And so it's really kind of neat that not only do I get a chance to write about really what I want to, which is kind of a scary thing, but I do enjoy having that creative outlet that's just a break away from everything during the week. It's a break from work, from things that are just going on in the world, and it's just a time to just sit down for a couple hours a week and write a column. So, but that's a neat opportunity, and the Times-Georgian has just been they continue to run them, and I'm grateful for that.
Well, that's really neat. Yeah, that's how I feel about my blog. It's kind of like therapy to sit down and write and get all your feelings out. And so that was about 8 years ago when you started. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. And you hit on something there too, because this started out as fun. And I grew up. We always had a newspaper in my home growing up. So, and I've been just a newspaper, radio. I've just been I'm still the guy who still picks up a newspaper. Still, I like to read one. Every day. I have switched to my iPad on a lot of newspapers. So sorry, it's gone digital for me in some ways, but I still am that's just part of my life. And and I grew up reading all the sports columnists, and I was a huge fan of Louis Grizzard, and it was just such a neat thing to when I was given this opportunity to write a column. I'd never written a column before, and all of a sudden I just realized this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love to write. And so around that time, something else happened that kind of rocked your world. So tell us a little bit about that 7 years ago.
Well, it was like I said, I started writing in January of 2012, and it like I said a little while ago, it started out as fun, and little did I know that writing would eventually become my therapy. And that was the night of October 27th of 2012 when it was an interesting day, because that was my dad's birthday, and we started out the day on the soccer fields with my oldest son Turner had a soccer game, and we were there, and then we go to a birthday party, and we order supper, and we go downtown, and the accident occurred on the square when we lost Will when he was struck by a truck, and it still it just there are no words for describing that moment. But as anyone who knows, who has gone through a tragedy, that it just changes your life forever, and it's just part of it. You will never ever look at life the same way again. And that moment in time really did. It changed me. It changed my family. It changed our friends and those around us. And and that's just what happened in the writing part of. I don't know why I did it, or I was a little reluctant to go. I didn't know whether I should write about this publicly or what, and I was kind of, I had some encouragement and some support. Really, I think about two clergy in our town, Hazel Glover, who was at St. Margaret's, and Steve Davis at First Baptist, really kind of helped me said, number one, it was therapy for me, but all of a sudden when I did basically write about my family's grief, what we were going through, and how heartbreaking this was, it was like people just started coming out of nowhere. And I realized I wasn't alone. My family wasn't alone. We really, people who had been through tragedy, it was just like, they're the ones who really get it.
Yeah, and that's amazing, and it just goes to show you never know when that just normal day is going to change your life forever. Well, we're going to take our first break and hear a word from our sponsors. We'll be right back with Community Voice.
A well-rounded education includes much more than just academics. At Oak Mountain Academy, we encourage our students to find their niche in any of our 42 co-curricular opportunities. Over the past 5 years, we have brought home 5 state and 20 regional athletic titles. Our one-act play and literary teams continuously compete at the region and state level, and our academic teams bring home first place more than not. We are warriors creating legacies. To learn more, visit oakmountain.us.
At Tanner, we're advancing health throughout West Georgia and East Alabama because we know that exceptional care isn't based on how many patients we serve, but how well we serve them. That's why we're focused on quality, delivering the best possible care for our patients. It's why we're expanding our clinical services and building new facilities to serve our growing community. And it's why we're looking beyond our hospitals and medical practices to develop sustainable wellness and preventive health programs in our region. What makes a hospital great has changed. It's not how many beds we have. It's how well we care for the neighbors who need them. Delivering the right care to every patient, every time, is how Tanner is advancing health with medicine beyond measure. Learn more at tanner.org. or find a physician on our medical staff by calling 770-214-CARE.
And we're back to the WLBB Community Voice program on News Talk 1330, FM 106.3. I'm your host, Sara Claudia Tillman, and we're here with Mr. Joe Garrett, who is talking about the immense loss that he suffered and how he was able to find strength to move forward and be that support for his family. So tell us a little bit more about Will. I know I've seen on your Facebook and through conversations with you that you have a passion for music, and I think Will shared that with you as well.
He did. He was just really the coolest kid, and he just had a love of life in his short 8 years. He was the kind of person who wanted to do it all, whether that was running a football, running on a cross country team, music. He just really had a love of music. As a matter of fact, all 4 of my boys have a love for music, and they're all extremely talented in what they're doing. My oldest son has really surpassed us all with his musical talents, and so but Will was just that kid who, he wanted to be a rock star when he grew up. And that's really something that he just wanted to play it all, because he played drums. His uncle was taught him how to play drums. He was taking piano. He was taking guitar. He just wanted to be able to do it all. And he was just such a sweet kid. He was really our peacemaker in a lot of ways, in the way he was in our family. And I don't know. I know some listeners will probably get this when I say this, but he was kind of one of those old souls in a young person's body, and that's really just love life and to the fullest, and that's something that I'll always and my family will always carry in our hearts.
And you talk about the community support, and I don't know if a lot of our listeners will know, but the AMP is actually named for Will, correct? It is, and that was really a very sweet, kind thing that the Carrollton City Council, and I know Mandy Meyerhofer, who was on the council at the time, really spearheaded that effort with the help of our former mayor Wayne Garner, and they got behind that, and it was really a very a sweet gesture, and I just love the how they did it too. It's just him on the wall of the AMP. It's not just some kind of just a picture. It's him playing his drums, and that really was how he lived, and I think that captured
captures him in so many ways.
Good way to remember him.
Yes.
Well, you talked about your writing, and when I lost my sight, I know writing helped me, but also my faith in God helped me, my relationship with my family. So what gave you kind of that hope and that drive to keep moving and to really just get out of bed in the morning and face the day?
Well, I mean, I have to admit, after the accident, getting out of bed was the hardest thing in the world. It just was. There's no doubt about it. That first year or 2 years, I mean, I feel like I was in a total fog. I often, as the writer and the person who, is out there with the weekly columns that people read, they sometimes see me as the one who's strong, and I really was not the one who was strong.
Yeah.
My wife Allie is really the one who carried our family. She is 50,000 times stronger than I am, and the way that we know when this happens, you have to keep going. And I thank God every day for my wife and my children, because without them, I just don't know how I would have made this. They really, we all, just had to take one step every day, and that was extremely hard. It took a long time.
I think that's such a good thing for people to hear, because I know I myself struggle with being vulnerable and showing people, yeah, I can make it through, but I still struggle. So I think a lot of times people who are going through grief and loss put too much pressure on themselves to look okay and to be okay, but it's good to hear from somebody who's gone through it and is still going through it that it's okay not to be okay all the time.
Yeah.
And to still need that support.
Exactly. And, it's when I think about this, I'll never forget when, I say we had multiple counselors throughout all this. So many of those were people who had lost a child, who just really were rocks to us. Clergy members in this town, our friends. It's just like we had this gigantic support group that just really surrounded us with presence. And I'll never forget when Allie and I went to see a grief counselor in Atlanta who had also lost a son, and he I'll never forget what he told us at the very first meeting. He said, "I want you to know that you are going to enjoy life again." But it's going to be a long, long time. And at first I thought, this guy's the biggest liar on the planet, because how in the world will we ever enjoy life again after going through this? And, it's, you and I have talked, just not on the radio, about how, it's when this happened, it's almost like somebody just sticking a giant knife in my stomach, and that knife stayed there for a long, long time. And as time, passed, it eventually that knife would come out, and it would get better, because after the tragedy, every day was like getting hit. Every minute was getting hit with a tidal wave. And, here we are, that was 2012, here we are in 2020, and that knife still goes in my stomach from time to time, and I find myself at times still right back in that moment, and it will never, ever, ever go away. And that's just part of grief, and that's the hardest part about, I wanted to make sure I read, people gave us books, people came from all over. I owe so many people thanks that I'll never be able to truly thank them for what that, and I really did pick up lots of those, and picked up nuggets from here and there about learning really what is grief, because I really had to give my grief a voice. And for that's doing a lot of crying, doing a lot of talking. For me, I'm able to write a lot of that, and just to get it out it's another thing, another line I love that our counselor told us, in that suppression brings depression. Expression brings resurrection. And when you have, when we're hit with this, I mean, we live in a culture today where we all want to fix it right now.
Yes.
We swallow a pill, we do this, we do that, and the reality of a tragedy and grief, it's not a quick fix, and you don't fix it, but it's a matter of giving it a voice, and you got to feel it. You got to feel that pain, and it's okay to get it out, because if you don't, that's the suppression part. And you have to kind of keep that in check, because it's easy. I mean, I'm guilty of being, clearly there have been times it's just, and I realize all of a sudden what's wrong. It's a lot of it's the grief, and it's not getting it out.
Well, I love that. I think that's so important for people to hear. You have to walk through it. You have to face the hard times in order to move past it and to find happiness despite it. But we're going to take our second break to hear a word from our sponsors, Tanner Health System and Oak Mountain Academy. And we'll be right back with Community Voice.
At Tanner, we're advancing health throughout West Georgia and East Alabama, because we know that exceptional care isn't based on how many patients we serve, but how well we serve them. That's why we're focused on quality, delivering the best possible care for our patients. It's why we're expanding our clinical services and building new facilities to serve our growing community. And it's why we're looking beyond our hospitals and medical practices to develop sustainable wellness and preventive health programs in our region. What makes a hospital great has changed. It's not how many beds we have. It's how well we care for the neighbors who need them. Delivering the right care to every patient, every time, is how Tanner is advancing health with medicine beyond measure. Learn more at tanner.org or find a physician on our medical staff by calling 770-214-CARE.
At Oak Mountain Academy, our daily schedule includes convocation, prayer, and the Pledge of Allegiance. By doing so, we build a family-like community where all students grow and flourish, and personal faith is encouraged. Through community service and a historical approach to biblical study, our students are taught the value of the warrior way: honesty, respect, and responsibility. Oak Mountain Academy. We are a family creating legacies. To learn more, visit oakmountain.us.
All right, we are back with the WLBB Community Voice program on News Talk 1330 FM 106.3. I'm your host, Sara Claudia Tillman, and we are here with Mr. Joe Garrett, who is giving us some very valuable insight into facing an immense loss and facing your grief in order to find happiness despite it. And we talked earlier about how you have a weekly column in the Times-Georgian, but that's not the only writing you've done. I understand you have a book that you brought with you. I
do. I have a book, and it's the title is Easy to Love, and it is available locally at Underground Bookstore off the square, and also at Turner Pharmacy on Dixie Street, and also it's available on Amazon.com as well. And that's really, it's a collection of my columns that I wanted to put together in some type of book, and the title of the book, "Easy to Love," it actually comes from a song that a dear friend of mine, Joe Stark, wrote. His brother David is married to my wife's sister Mary, and Will just fell in love with these guys. They're professional musicians, and in Will's funeral, they sang the song "Easy to Love," and that was just something I thought would be kind of the way I would go, and I decided to title the book, from that song, and with Joe's permission. And so the book, I didn't know how to group it, so I started looking through all my columns because, like I said earlier, they let me write about whatever I want to write about. Mm-hmm. And so the more I started going through them, I realized that it's kind of like the seasons of the year. Some of them are like summer, some like fall. Winter, of course, is kind of a dark period of the year, and then there's spring and the resurrection that comes along with that. And so that was how I grouped the columns and put them together in the book. And it pretty much includes our journey through especially right after Will died and the grief that we experienced, and so that was. There's one chapter in the book, and we were talking about how hard it is to get up every day, and I'll never forget. We were in Highlands, North Carolina, in a restaurant one night, and it had been, of course, it's just been a long year for our family. And one night, my youngest son, Henry, is just a comedian, and he's making everybody at the table laugh. And so all of a sudden, my family is just laughing, and people in the restaurant are watching us. And when we got up, my wife took the kids on out to the street. I was going to go and pay, and I had to run to the restroom because I started crying. And I was not crying because of sadness. I was crying because we just, as a family, just had a dinner where we were laughing. Yeah. And that was kind of that was just another one of those moments where you realize we're going to do this. Mm-hmm. We got to keep going. Yeah. And so I'm going to read from the book real quickly. If this is the way I end the book, and it's called "Must Be an Omen." Grasshoppers can only jump forward. For most of my life, I've only thought of these tiny green insects as making a crackling sound of Mother Nature's music. But recently, one appeared inside my house above my back door to teach me something new. It all started with a dog and a teenager. Last week, my oldest son, Turner, turned 13 years old. It's an exciting time to watch him enter a new phase of independence, self-discovery, raging hormones, and eventually pimples on the front of his nose. His adolescent years will hopefully be filled with many great memories and joyous moments. But as anyone who's ever raised a teenager knows, it won't be easy. Even as kids reach adolescence, they need more than ever for us to watch over them, said child-rearing expert Dr. Ron Taffel. Adolescence is not about letting go. It's about hanging on during a very bumpy ride. The seasons come and go, and somewhere along the way, even in the darkest of times, an angel appears without wings. In Turner's case, an angel appeared in a cage wagging his tail. His grandparents surprised him with an 8-week-old puppy. In fact, my entire family was surprised. "I thought you said you bought him a new watch," my wife said with a smile to her mother. "Surprise," her mom replied, grinning ear to ear. My family quickly fell in love with the new dog, and like having a new child in the home, we know the future will clearly be different with the new addition. The first night, the puppy slept great and even used the potty in our backyard when we took him outside. As the morning coffee brewed in the kitchen and the dog chewed on a toy, my wife called me into the kitchen to inform me we had a visitor. "A couple of hours ago, a grasshopper was sitting above our back door," she said. "I picked it up and threw it outside, and now another grasshopper is back sitting in the exact same spot. I hope it's not a bad omen." She decided to research the significance of a grasshopper appearing inside a home. According to many beliefs and cultures, a grasshopper in the house represents good luck. It often symbolizes you are about to take a giant leap of faith to change a specific area in your life without fear. It also could be telling you to go ahead and move forward, getting past what is hindering you. For the most part, all possible outcomes will be positive. Furthermore, for almost 3 years, I feel as though I'm treading in grief since losing my son. There are too many days where I'm so damn tired of feeling sad, I want to feel normal, laugh, and erase the tragedy from my mind. It's often too heavy. And then something comes along and lightens the load. Maybe the grasshopper happened to get lost and found a way into my home last Sunday morning, but I don't think it was an accident. Grasshoppers can only move forward, not sideways or backwards. And maybe the little insect arrived as a small messenger from another world to teach me this lesson. I haven't seen an angel, only a grasshopper, but I feel as though this tiny little creature, along with a new puppy and a teenager, are leading the way.
I love that so much, and unfortunately we're out of time. I could sit here and talk to you all day, but I think that's a great way to close out our segment, and I hope the listeners gain some valuable insight on how to feel your great grief and move through it in order to come out better on the other side. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back next month here on Community Voice. Thank you.
Thank you.